She heals by touch, but the scars show. We called her the robed woman. She was always covered head to toe in clothes. Not dark, not religious wear, just fully covered. She didn't talk to people. She rarely was seen outside, but she went out regularly. Where she went was unknown, but there were always rumors. Aren't there always when a woman behaves strangely? Naturally, we all thought her a witch. If only we had an inkling of how things would turn out, maybe we wouldn't have done what we did. Not like it matters now. I was 14, had grown up in a small town as a girl who was bigger and meaner than the other girls, and I thought I was the worst teenager to ever walk the mean streets of redacted Tilda. When my parents needed to move, I thought my world was over. I was going to have to start a new school and meet new people, and nobody knew I was the jerk to fear, but I would find a way. On my first day, I watched the kids interact, saw who stood out as my kind, and went for the main girl at lunch. I knew her name was Valerie, and I was going to have to show her who I was. I stood over her, told her I was sitting with them, and if they didn't like it I would introduce their stomachs to my fists. At first, they hurled insults at me and made me reconsider, but then Valerie glared at me and told me, "You think you're good enough to sit with us, you giant noob? Prove it." So I did. I took her milk, walked over to a kid I'd seen them earlier harassing, and dumped it on her head and tray. They broke into guffaws of laughter. I passed it off as I tripped, and it's not like the little pimple was going to tell on me. That sealed my place in the group, and I quickly became best friends with Valerie. I know looking back I was a horrible bully and wrong. I know you're sneering and hating me and wishing horrible things happened to me. Don't worry, you won't be disappointed with that. Back to the robed woman. So she lived on the street I moved to, which unfortunately also was the street the girl we picked on the most lived on. Unfortunately for her, Valerie and the group thought it was perfect. My house ended up being the home base for our hangouts because my mom was always working and my dad, well, he just didn't give a crap what we did as long as he didn't have to deal with me. We would hang out, torment the girl down the street, and generally just be the little buttholes we liked being. My parents tried to be good parents and redirect me from my obvious crappy behavior, but I was more than they could handle. My mom tried, but she worked so many hours as a doctor in a busy hospital, and my dad? Well, he just couldn't be bothered. He taught me how to stand up to bullies when I was young and stood out because I was bigger than other kids and got picked on in elementary school. He had no idea I would take that and run with it. I enjoyed watching those kids who tormented me cry. Watching their fear of me gave me so much power, and I just didn't know how to let it go. I keep getting sidetracked to myself. I can't help it. Even now, I still want to explain myself, like anything I can say or do will make the things I've done make sense to you. We had caught glimpses of the robed woman. We made jokes about who she might be, why she seems so secretive, how she was probably one of those new-aged weirdos who live off granola and infant sacrifices or something. As crappy teens, we were highly focused on our prey rather than the weirdo down the street. The next year, shortly after I turned 15, was the first time I saw her up close. I hadn't known what to expect, hearing all the rumors, but she wasn't scary at all. At least not in a way that would affect other people, but she saw through me, and that was worse than anything. She was a pretty woman with a hairline of raven black hair tucked under her hood. She was in a long flowing dress with long sleeves the blue color of a light morning sky. She had on a belt that was deep orange and yellow and a hood that hid her face in shadow that seemed to be specially made to wear under her clothes. It was a darker shade of blue while still being light, but it also covered her neck and chest where the dress didn't. What showed off her face was beautiful. She had large eyes that looked violet in the sun, a small nose, large dark red lips, and very pale skin. In the brief direct view I had of her, I saw what looked like scars all over her face. Just little white lines randomly crossing her face. She didn't have eyebrows, she had too many scars where they should be. I realized she wasn't pale, her face was just, all scars. The thought disgusted and terrified me at the same time. She had looked directly at me and I hated the feeling it gave me when she did that. When our eyes met, it felt like she saw me. Saw through me. Saw what a scared dumb little girl I was. Saw how nasty and ugly I was compared to her, even scarred as she was. I hated her. I wanted to hurt her. I didn't ever want to feel judged the way she made me feel ever again. I didn't know what this monster that was growing inside of me was or why it was focusing so much on that one moment when our eyes met, but it was unbearable. This untenable feeling of loathing and rage needed an outlet. So I called Valerie and told her I saw her face. I told her the robed woman had looked at me and I knew she was a witch and evil, and we had to get her. So we made a plan. I don't know why we did what we did. I think some deep part of me knew I was a monster. A deep part of me knew this wasn't just harmless bullying and pranks. I so often think back and wonder, how much lying to myself did I do versus knowing there was something inherently wrong with me and I needed to stop. I can't explain to you why I am the way I am. I'm pontificating again. I can't excuse my actions. Today as I sit here writing this and using flowery words to explain myself like I can save myself from the evil that I did, I can't help but laugh at my pathetic attempts to validate my actions. I didn't grow up abused, hurt, or having any reason to be the hateful little poop I was. I was just bad. She had a beautiful backyard. It was rumored she only gardened at night and you had to be in a house nearby looking out a tall window to see over her fence to even see her colorful backyard full of flowers, fruiting plants, and other things I now know to be animal stations. She had a spot for bees and insects, an area for birds, and another for critters like rabbits and squirrels. Her backyard was a utopia of colors and smells and beauty, and that's how we decided to get to her. We figured if she gardened at night, that would be the perfect time to confront her. Just thinking about it now makes me feel so stupid and small. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. We watched for weeks. Watched her patterns through my back window on a sleepover after sleepover. Watched her tend her garden. Watched her sitting in her little gazebo with her face hidden in shadows just sitting there for hours in the dark. It seemed to bolster our idea that she was a witch. That she was the evil one. That she was doing something nefarious and wrong. She was enjoying her space and we made it seem like she was skinning kittens and drinking their blood. We were so determined to paint her as a villainous being that deserved our retribution. We didn't mean to take it so far, but it all happened so fast. One minute we're sneaking over to put nails in the seat of her gazebo and the next thing we know, we're caught because stupid Valerie lost her balance. She tripped and fell in just the right way to slam her hand onto one of the long nails we hammered through the bench of the gazebo. She tried not to scream, but when a nail goes all the way through your hand, that's an impossible task. The blood, there was so much blood. She tried to pull her hand up and just kept screaming so loud I thought my ears would burst. 1 second I'm staring in shock and horror, and the next second I'm being gently pushed out of the way. The woman had rushed out at the sound of Valerie's screams and she didn't have a hood on. When I saw her without the hood, I started screaming too. Her hair and head looked misshapen from all the scars. Thousands of thin inch-long scars made her hair patchy and mange-like, while her face and neck were shiny in the moonlight from all the scar tissue. Her gloveless hands were covered as well in the same scars. She rushed to Valerie's side and put her hands over Valerie's pierced hand. Her hand seemed to glow and it looked like her hands went through Valerie's hand. I didn't understand what was happening, but I thought for certain there was something wrong with this woman. Something sick, something evil. She was doing something to Valerie's hand and it was wrong. I rushed over and pushed her away. I swear I only meant to push her away from Valerie. That's not what ended up happening. Valerie's hand was off the nail somehow. She was holding it out and appeared to be staring at it. It wasn't bleeding anymore. There was no hole. There was no wound. I followed her eyes and saw she wasn't staring at her hand. She was staring at the woman. A fresh scar had begun appearing on the side of her face, glowing dimly as her hands had been, but the scar was opening like a wound and bleeding. I saw what I had done and I realized there was no going back from this. She was laying on the bench with her face towards us, blinking and trying to speak. Her head was flush with the bench, the nails we had hammered through not visible anymore. I stood in shock and horror knowing why, knowing what I did but unable to fully comprehend the situation. The woman reached out, still trying to speak. I tried to escape her hand but in my shock, I had no power. When she pulled me to her I couldn't resist and allowed her to pull my ear towards her mouth as my legs lost their power and I fell to my knees beside her. In my closeness, to her, I could see the blood coming out from under her head. I could hear the insects and the light pattering of her blood dripping on the ground. Once her lips were nearly touching my ear I could make out what she was saying, and it made my blood run cold. She was whispering over and over, my burden was heavy and you released me, now it's your burden to carry. I can't be around Valerie or the other girls anymore. I can't be around people. I didn't know before how ugly people are on the inside. How ugly I was. I can see it now. I can see you. Your dirty secrets, your hidden mean habits, and your thoughts. It's hard to be around people. I know what she knew. That people are flawed creatures that do terrible things to each other. It took me years to come to terms with the curse and gift she gave me in her dying moments. I can also see the beauty in people. Some of you shine like stars on the darkest nights. Like diamonds. I can feel your kindness like a soft warm blanket. These days I don't go out much. I've started wearing long sleeves regardless of the weather. My mom thought I was a cutter and self-harming until I showed her. I went to work with her one day and showed her. Now I'm studying to be a sleep study specialist. I don't sleep, so I might as well do something with that time. People don't bother me as much when they're asleep. Seeing people for what they are isn't the only part of this curse, gift, whatever this is. I can heal with my hands. It costs me an inch of flesh at a time. I can see where the sickness is and take it away from you. I can't help the compulsion to help. I have to do it. It's like a sickness that won't pass until I use my power, and I hated that aspect of this. I don't anymore. I know you're probably thinking this was a wonderful gift and it's forced me to be a better person. You're half right. It is a wonderful gift. I can see the beautiful good people for the shining lights that they are, and I can see the darkness inside people. I know she thought she was helping me by passing her burden on to me, but I think she missed something. I don't want to help people be better. I don't like people. I've learned if I help people they only go on to dim and darken anyways over time, so I've decided they aren't worth my effort. It's much more interesting to see just how dark people can get if I help them. Most of these scars? I got them from helping heal my father over and over while my mother does things to him to test my abilities. You see, my mother is a sadist and my father was an enabler. I never knew because she hid it well, caring for patients and seeming to be such a helpful doctor. Once I had this ability to see, I truly saw what she was. She was like me, their pain and fear of death and her power over them gives her a thrill. Now she can do anything she wants and I can fix it for her. And boy, do we make one hell of a team.